Excellencies, distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen, good afternoon and welcome to the CSIS Regional Dialogue on Indonesia's Chairmanship of ASEAN and the Myanmar Crisis, Expectations and Aspirations. My name is Wafa Karisma, and it's my honor to be your host for today's event. This event is organized by the Center for Strategic and International Studies, CSIS Indonesia. The dialogue today is designed to facilitate discussion between distinguished experts from Myanmar and around the region to share their ideas and discuss the way ahead for Indonesia's ASEAN chairmanship next year in dealing with especially the Myanmar crisis. Before we start our agenda for today, please allow me to warmly greet the honorable speakers and key figures attending the event here in Jakarta and virtually. May I please welcome His Excellency Igor Driesmans, Ambassador of the European Union to ASEAN. I'd like to also welcome later His Excellency Teng Sijun, who will join us later in the venue. He's the Ambassador of the People's Republic of China to ASEAN. We have also joining us online Mr. Moe Zaw Oo, Deputy Minister of Foreign Affairs of the National Unity Government of Myanmar. We have Mr. Amara Thiha, researcher at the Peace Research Institute, Oslo. And here we have in Jakarta, Mr. Min Zin, founding member and executive director of the Institute for Strategy and Policy-Myanmar. And we have Mr. Nimrod Andrew, secretary at the Foreign Relations Department of the current National Union. And we have joining us online also, last but not least, is Ms. Moe Thuzar, the coordinator for the Myanmar Studies program at the ISEAS-Yusof Ishak Institute, Singapore. And I would like also to welcome Jusuf Wanandi, Vice Chairman, Board of Trustees, CSIS Foundation, who's been a key figure in supporting our missions, of course, for ASEAN's missions to support ASEAN's mission for Myanmar. And I think we also have online Ms. Clara Juwono, I think joining us from Zoom, Vice Chair of the Board of Directors at CSIS Foundation. Once again, I'd like to welcome our distinguished figures and speakers, as well as the guests and participants who have kindly joined us today, both in Jakarta and online. Without further ado, to formally open the dialogue, may I invite Mr. Jusuf Wanandi, Vice Chair of the Board of Trustees, CSIS Foundation, and co-founder of CSIS Indonesia, to deliver his welcoming remarks. Pak Jusuf Wanandi, the stage is yours.
Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen, excellencies. On behalf of the Center for Strategic and International Studies, I would like to welcome you all to the CSIS Regional Dialogue on Indonesia's Chairmanship of ASEAN and the Myanmar Crisis, Expectations and Aspirations. Today, we are honored to be able to welcome many people, particularly as follows. His Excellency Teng Sijun, Ambassador of the People's Republic of China to ASEAN. His Excellency Igor Driesmans, Ambassador of the European Union to ASEAN. Mr. Moe Zaw Oo, Deputy Minister of Foreign Affairs of the National Unity Government of Myanmar. We have honored you. We are very honored to have you in this event. I would like also to have some time to welcome the rest of our distinguished leaders, speakers today. May I welcome Mr. Amara Thiha, researcher at the Peace Research Institute of Oslo, Mr. Min Zin, founding member and executive director of the Institute of Strategy and Policy, Myanmar, Mr. Nimrod Andrew, secretary at the Foreign Relations Department of the current National Union, Ms. Moe Thuzar, the host coordinator to the Myanmar Studies program at the ISEAS-Yusof Ishak Institute, Singapore. I'm very pleased to welcome you all and appreciate the time you spent for us and for this event. Today, we will be discussing the regional expectations and the aspirations on Indonesia's chairmanship of ASEAN in 2023, especially in regards to ASEAN's role and mission to lend support to the Myanmar crisis. Southeast Asia and ASEAN are currently facing one of their biggest challenges in recent time. That challenge is the current multi-layered crisis in Myanmar. This issue has pulled apart the very confidence on Southeast Asia's unity and threatened ASEAN's relevance. Despite persistent diplomatic from Southeast Asian leaders and foreign ministers, arguably there has not been much success when it comes to improving the situation surrounding the Myanmar crisis. ASEAN continues to face challenges in promoting its unity to the more progressive solutions and ideas. The 5-point consensus, which was agreed last year, has yet to be thoroughly implemented. Following the results of the ASEAN summit last week, ASEAN managed to pull together a number of decisions, quote unquote, to proceed with the Myanmar issue. Among others, ASEAN agrees to substantiate the 5-point consensus with concrete, practical, and measurable indicators on a specific timeline. ASEAN also tasked the ASEAN foreign ministers to develop such implementation plan. Through this event, we seek to draw inputs so that we can truly move with implementing the 5-point consensus. Given the critical situation in Myanmar, a sustained push for leadership among Southeast Asian countries is required. While the chairmanship does not necessarily equate to leadership, the ASEAN chair often emerges as key in determining the breadth of achievement set on a particular year. Expectations for Indonesia's upcoming chairmanship are high. Indonesia is expected to engage with various stakeholders within Myanmar to consolidate support among member states and procure and produce practical actions to handle the situation. This is why today we invite a number of experts from Myanmar, as well as our ASEAN dialogue partners, to express their expectations and aspirations to help support Indonesia's chairmanship of ASEAN. At the end of the day, the people of Myanmar is a true victim of this crisis, and they need our regional support. Hopefully, the discussion today can provide suggestions to Indonesia in navigating its chairmanship of ASEAN in 2023 and the way forward for ASEAN in responding to the Myanmar conflict. I look forward to produce a full and fruitful discussion on these issues. I thank you, and I'm looking forward to listen to your advices. Thank you.
Thank you for your remarks, Mr. Wanandi. Now, before we begin, just allow me to provide a small technical briefing on today's event. Today's event follows the format of a dynamic talk show between a host and a set of distinguished speakers. If time allows later, Following the exchanges between the host and the speakers, we may also pick up a couple of questions from the floor. So I think we should have time for that later on during the session. Now, beginning with the next session. The next session seeks to invite the views from Myanmar on ASEAN's mission for Myanmar, particularly next year in 2023, on what many experts have called a very important year for the crisis. To lead off session 1, I wish to warmly invite our host, Dr. Evan Laksmana, to the stage. Dr. Laksmana is Senior Research Fellow at the Center on Asia and Globalization, Lee Kuan Yew School of Public Policy at the National University of Singapore. Dr. Laksmana, the time is yours.
Thank you, Wafa. Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. First, let me say thank you to CSIS Indonesia for bringing me back here. It's always nice to be back home, although I'm just coming in just for the day. But I think the issue that we are discussing today is exceptionally crucial. And I think the best way, as much as we could, we should have these frank conversations in person. So it's also nice to see you again, Pa Jusuf, friends from Myanmar and from all around the region. So as Wafa mentioned, I will try to moderate the discussion in more of a talk show format. I'll try to have some preliminary questions, and then hopefully each of the experts and speakers will have about 5 or 6 to 7 minutes to respond, and then I'll pick up with more questions. Could be follow-up. It could be from some of the lists that I'm sure all of the speakers have seen. Before we begin, let me just set the stage a little bit and highlight, I think, how we got to where we are. I think following the coup last year, certainly Indonesia was among the first to try to formulate a collective response from ASEAN, which then became the 5-point consensus, which we are now trying to revive one way or the other. I think compared to any other issues, whether it's the South China Sea or others, I think Myanmar is solely, I think, very much an ASEAN responsibility. ASEAN cannot and should not shy away and say this is too complicated, this is something we don't understand, this is great power's fault. No, this is our responsibility. So I think ASEAN should still play a key role in trying to address the crisis. Secondly, in terms of where we are, in terms of the recent few meetings by ASEAN on Myanmar, both in terms of the Special Foreign Ministers meeting as well as the summit a few days ago, I think we are now at a stage in which the leaders of ASEAN have decided that there is no other point of diplomatic reference or framework. ASEAN 5-point consensus is it. Now, that is not saying that it's perfect. That's not saying it's easy. But I think what we are trying to say is that the key goals of the 5-point consensus, cessation of violence, aid delivery, and inclusive dialogue, I think remain the key goals that ASEAN should strive for. The issue is, how do we get there? The methods and mechanics of delivery is what we're trying to work around. And that's why you see discussion about whether or not we need to discuss the modalities of the special envoy, whether or not we need to expand the sort of sticks and carrots tools that ASEAN may have, and even including discussions to empower the next Secretary General, which will come from Cambodia. So we will be coming into a very interesting time next year. Not only will we have a new ASEAN chair and special envoy, but we will also be working with a new ASEAN Secretary General as well. So what I hope this discussion today will rally around is, of course, we have to question whether or not those 3 goals that the 5-point consensus is still doable, or have those ideas expired over the past year, given the increasing violence and polarization. But if we can agree that those are the 3 goals that we should still strive for, how do we get around helping Indonesia and helping ASEAN to actually get there better and probably, hopefully sooner as well? So we will try to center the discussions around a few key items, the timeline in which We would like to see, for example, the self-declared mandate of the SAC will expire in February, whether or not Indonesia as chair has a particular response. Are there timelines and framework that was decided at the summit? Will they be proposed before the announcement? So I think these are our key questions that I hope we can hear more from our friends from Myanmar. So let me begin with Mr. Moe Zaw Oo and ask the first question. How do you see things developing for Myanmar next year, particularly around the supposed announced election that we will see, whether or not the mandate of the SAC will expire? How do you expect, in particular, the international community and, of course, ASEAN to respond to what you think will be crucial timeline as we move forward? We've also heard, for example, that NUG has said that there is a timeline for one final push to victory, for example. Is this something that ASEAN should be working with as well? Mr. Moe Zaw Oo, you have the floor.
Thank you. Thank you very much, organizers of this event. I'm really honored to have a chance to participate in this CSIS regional dialogue. So first of all, I would like to say that the military junta is now preparing for a major offensives. The military operations to destroy and defeat the ethnic resistance organizations, even headquarters and bases, especially located in the border areas, and successively the People's Defense Forces in the country. And the military already bought, for example, Yak-130 fighter jets, Mi-35 helicopters from Russia Federation and some other countries as well, and already attacked and bombed even purely civilian targets, killing many people on the ground. In September, for example, 2 military helicopters opened fire at a school in Sakai region, killing 13 people, including 7 children. And very recently, fighter jets carried out an airstrike and bombed an outdoor musical concert in Kachin State, killing about more than 70 people. Some people said that more than 100 people, mostly civilians. That Myanmar military's indiscriminate and disproportionate use of violence will continue next year because they want to stabilize the country. The whole country is using force and violence because they would like to hold an illegitimate sham elections. I don't want to call it elections because it is not an election at all. So they would like to hold the sham so-called election next year to continue their hold on power. So the military has to stretch its forces into different places across the country as it is being in war with its own people and different ethnic groups at every corner of the country. So their ground forces have been spread thin, and they will continue to rely on the air power. By the way, we learned that ASEAN appointed the military junta's officer to chair the ASEAN Air Chiefs Conference on November 4, despite the fact that the junta's air force is killing civilians using airstrikes. So it is ridiculous, I would say, and hypocritical for the ASEAN to do so while the ASEAN Charter is people-centered and people-oriented. So in the first quarter of next year, I would say that there will be more area air strikes, air attacks on both military and civilian targets. They don't distinguish them anyway. More offensives on different places, including ethnic resistance groups' strongholds. More people will be displaced and more civilians will be killed, tortured, or arrested by the military junta. And what is the role of the international and regional organizations and regional community in these developments? So there are a lot of things I think that the international community or the regional community can do. The international or regional community must do whatever they could to prevent this kind of atrocity that I mentioned from taking place across the country. The military regime will not simply listen to what the international community or regional community said, or concede to the demands of the international community unless they are pressured to do so. So we need a very coordinated effort to prevent such atrocities. And I think we also need a practical humanitarian aid that can reach to the people who are really in need, but not through the military junta, because the military is intentionally barring these aids from reaching out to these places as part of their full-cut strategy. So it is totally impractical to work together with the military junta to deliver such aid to the area where the junta has intentionally blocked. Thank you. I will stop here.
Thank you so much, Mr. Moe Zaw Oo. I thought that was a very concise, although rather bleak assessment, which of course many of us here share as well in terms of the concerns. Let me now turn to Mr. Amara Thiha, who's joining us from Oslo. It's good to see you again, Amara. Let me ask now that we've heard from Mr. Moe Zaw Oo about sort of the grim prospects of next year, both in terms of sham elections as well as offensive in terms of airstrikes and all of that. Do you think ASEAN can alter the behavior of the junta or the SAC in particular, or the military in general, to change that likely particular horrible trajectory? And what do you think Indonesia could do as the next chair of ASEAN to push for such a thing, assuming that we can actually say that ASEAN could actually alter the behavior? But I would like to have your response and your assessments of how do you think ASEAN could actually change the behavior of the military. Amara, the floor is yours.
Thanks. Thanks. First of all, the junta or Myanmar armed forces is not always monolithic. They are dynamic, they change, and they have a different dynamic power structure internally. So, and they also have a track record of adaptability, and they adapt the situation, and they also transform both politically and in the military strategy too. So if you track how they change the and transform the institution in the past 20 years, and also even the military strategy in the past year, as you can easily track it out. At the same time, there is no track record of change internally caused by the external pressure. So if you looking back from 1988 to 2012, during the previous past two regime, the just regime is simply move on its own pace with its own agenda. So the Myanmar armed forces have these two very different traits, and they have they usually adapt the situation, but at the same time they usually never change because of the external forces. So the chance of success for the behavior changes, of course, is possible, but through the external pressure is slim. There is no track record. If ASEAN can do so right now, it is a pretty big step. And Indonesia have only the 1 year, and there's a time constraint to challenge the established epistemology of the institution itself. So if Indonesia want to push for the positive changes on the situation, I think we better try to looking from the other perspective, rather than thinking to change the institution and directly challenging for the adaptation. We can start looking on how to facilitate and creating a platform for the mediation and the track to engagement. This is what ASEAN can do on. So Indonesia, of course, since the beginning have tried proactively for engaging with the stakeholders and seek for political situation. Of course, it's not successful because it's the early day of the conflict, and then there is no ripeness yet. But now Indonesia have a more, background context, and also have a political capital. And with these years, they got a prestige to be part of the mediation. I think it is the good time for Indonesia to start taking as a leading and creating a platform for the track to. Of course, it will not be easy, and there will be many setbacks and have to change a lot, but there will be no political situation or solution without initiating the track to engagement. This is something that I believe in. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Amara. As we move to the next speaker, let me first invite Minzin to come to the stage, as well as Nimrod to come to the stage as well, so that we can have a conversation further. Please. So first, let me say it's always nice to see Minzin again. I keep telling Minzin that I see Minzin more than I see my father these days. So it's always nice to see Minzin again. Minzin, now that we've heard from NUG as well as from Amara, is there a particular set of domestic dynamics in Myanmar the following year as Indonesia becomes chair that ASEAN should particularly anticipate and try to develop response around before the situation forces us to react rather than preparing a particular set of options? So are there particular signs or timeline within the domestic context in Myanmar that ASEAN should be closely looking to?
First of all, thank you for having me here, and also always good to see you, Evan. I think the Moe Zaw Oo already pointed out the most important timeline for all of us would be whether the junta is going to organize sham election in 2023. That's a key issue because this election, people tend to compare with the 2010 election, which is actually is not true, because in 2010, whether we like it or not, it was the only game in town at the time, even though we disagree at the time because of the 2008 constitution that enshrined military veto power. But in 2010 transition, that election was somewhat instrumental to open up the country for the liberalization, if not democratization per se. But for this time, because the memory of like the Burmese military to renege 2020 election where the people voted for National League for Democracy overwhelmingly, it was very recent. And then in past a year and a half or two, the brutal crackdown against the resistance movement and then an armed protester are still very fresh. So I think it's very different. And more importantly, in 2010, Burmese military at that time at least managed to co-opt some of the key players from ethnic as well as the Burma majority. But this time, I think the way that they prepare for the election seemed to be very much unilateral. So it's very difficult for the other players to participate in this game. So that's, to me, this 2023 election could create further instability because it will trigger more violence and more bloodshed. So whoever support this election will be somewhat complicit in this. So that's why, like, practically, I don't think this is a way out. And also politically, as I said, it's different from 2010 election because of very unilateral. So it will now, I think the commander-in-chief, the Burmese military chief, will not be able to mainstream his political agenda in 2023. It will be very much, very narrowly participating election. So like that will not be able to address broader political crisis. And more importantly, people are very wary of the Tamador, the Burmese military, involved in the politics in this way. So I think it would be very unfair and offensive, insensitive to the Burmese people, Myanmar people, to endorse this election, because Tamador or its proxy people will come back to the executive through the revolving door as a president or like the new administration. So to me, this election poses a serious threat for all of us. But the challenge is, I mean, in principle, we say no. But in reality, what do we do? How do we make sure this election will not happen? Because in Myanmar, in our political history and culture, we do not have successful experience of doing politics based on contract, based on political pact, based on negotiated agreement. It's all about default. If you are in the dominant power with the more arms, more weapons, you win. If you are getting the more votes, for popular support, you win. So it's like default options seem to be very much defining character of Myanmar politics. So that's why I think it's very important. If they manage to push ahead with this sham election, we are worried that the politics will be locked in another 5 years. And we will have a hard time to reverse things back to find any possible solution. So for now, it's for ASEAN, for Indonesia, this is the time for us to generate more creative idea, option, to make sure how to prevent this sham election taking place in Myanmar, because that will be like very much inefficient, dangerous, suboptimal option. No one will benefit from that. Everyone will be like suffering from this option. That's why is for all of us how to make sure it will not happen and find creative options and solution before the election. Thank you.
Thank you, Min Sin, for outlining to us, I think, what is a crucial point about the election and why ASEAN, and particularly Indonesia as ASEAN chair, should actually develop proper options and responses before the announcement because of its high stakes nature. And that I think as ASEAN chair, as Min Sin pointed out, it's going to be very consequential. And if it's not going to improve things and makes things a lot much worse, certainly it should be on the first priority for Indonesia as well. Let me bring in Mr. Nimrod Andrew here from KNU. And let me ask you, within the context of both the election as well as the potential sham election, as well as the ongoing violence, how would you consider the role of the ethnic groups in determining and shaping a stable and unified Myanmar in the future? Because I think the role of the ethnic groups often is less discussed when ASEAN is thinking about its engagement with the people of Myanmar. Nimrod?
Yes, thank you so much, Your Excellency, ladies and gentlemen, and distinguished guests. I feel very honored to be here this afternoon, and also thank you for the opportunity. I think this is very timely to discuss about Myanmar issue here, since ASEAN chairman will be Indonesia next year. I think when we talk about the ethnic issue, we not only talk about ethnic minority right or their need, because Myanmar is a multi-ethnic country, and the Burma majority is make up only about 40 to 60%. And along the history, ethnic peoples, I put a note here, we have been fighting for 70 years, but we are not just armed groups. Most of the ethnic armed groups have their political organization as well as security wings. And they control territory. For example, many of them are international border, for example, in the China border, in the India border, in the Bangladesh and Thailand. And also they provide security for their own people in their territories. And moreover, they also give social services. Many of the services are, I would say, even better or sophisticated than the Myanmar government deliver. For example, I can give one example of KNU. For example, we have education, health, which are not under our military wings, and also very independent from our government system. So this is something I think very important in Myanmar. And I think along the history, ethnic peoples are fighting for a federal system. And we are always calling for a dialogue, a meaningful dialogue between central government and ethnic peoples. And to resolve the armed conflict in the country. And in terms of unify Myanmar, I want to bring back a few history here, because I think unify Myanmar should not be under the forced assimilation or under the centralization of governments. because in our Myanmar history, we could see that the Burmese king or the Burmese, the Burma kings took over some of the territory, and they created it as a kingdom, a Myanmar kingdom. But I think the ethnic people are calling for a federal union where we share the responsibility, we share the resources, we share our power between central and our state people. And another point that I want to mention is in the federal system, I think it is important that the ethnic people are having a self-determination and autonomous within a federal union. And also, it is important to claim that ethnic people are not just a minority within the Burma country. It is our union, and it is a shared country for all of us. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Nimrod, for that very important context about how crucial ethnic groups in Myanmar can be, not just in terms of resistance and all that, but also in terms of providing social services. I think that's a very important context that is often underappreciated in discussions in ASEAN. For our last speaker, let me invite Ms. Moe Thuzar, and let me ask you, now that Indonesia is taking over as ASEAN chair, do you think Indonesia should still continue to work within the constraints of the 5-point consensus? Or are there steps that Indonesia could take as chair to improve or accelerate its full implementation? Should we consider expanding the ban on the participation of SAC officials beyond the foreign ministers to the other sectoral meetings, as Mr. Moe Zaw Oo mentioned about the ASEAN Air Chiefs Conference? If not, what else can we do in Indonesia as ASEAN chair? Mo, please.
Thank you, Evan. Good afternoon to everyone from where I'm sitting in Singapore. And my thanks, of course, go to CSIS Indonesia for always thinking of me for whenever we talk about ASEAN and Myanmar. And a shout out to everyone on the panel. It's good to see you again. And it's also good to meet Nimrod, albeit virtually. And it's always very informative to hear the different inputs and views from people who have made this the topic of your dedicated focus, interest, and study. Evan, I think you always like to leave kind of like the most difficult questions for the last for me, don't you? But facetiousness aside, we are talking about a very important and serious topic, and it's at a very, I would say, critical juncture right now as chairmanship rotation goes now to Indonesia, and bearing very much in mind the points that Moe Zaw Oo, Amara, Minzin, and Nimrod have each added to the discussion. Let me just say, the question that you posed to me about Indonesia as the incoming ASEAN chair, as the chair for 2023, whether or not it should continue with the 5-point consensus, I think here it's important to contextualize what do we understand by the 5-point consensus. I mean, I've always looked at it as a framework. And as a framework, I've always seen that it's important to have an implementation plan or guidelines. So I think the leaders' review and decision at the summits that have just recently concluded that are now calling specifically for those measurable indicators and deliverables, I think is a good step forward, because now we will be able to see, and Indonesia as chair will also have a bit of that leading coordinating role into setting what you want to see out of the 4 unmet or partially met priorities of the 5-point consensus. Let's look at it, right? I mean, apart from appointing the special envoy, the other 4 priorities, 2 are completely unmet with regard to ceasing violence and talking to all stakeholders in that sense. Partially met would, of course, be points like the efforts that ASEAN has tried to do for humanitarian assistance, which I think Moe Zaw Oo has also pointed out about, the State Administration Council manipulating the process. So I think we really need now then to look at how much and what we can do in specifying those deliverables, indicators, and timelines. And when we do that, of course, bearing in mind that the broad priority of the 5-point consensus is consulting the views of all stakeholders. I think it's really, now up to Indonesia to look at creative ways of how you're going to do that. For example, now when you talk about an implementation plan, and in ASEAN, when we talk about these kinds of community plans and actions for the different community building exercises, there is some sort of consultation that goes on with stakeholders and different sectors. Now, translating that ASEAN process into what we want to do for the 5-point consensus, the question now becomes, how do we get the inputs and views of all the different stakeholders in Myanmar to make sure that these timelines, indicators, and the deliverables are points that the stakeholders in Myanmar representing the people and the voices of the different communities in Myanmar can agree on. So here I'm driving at the kind of ways that we can engage inputs as we are today with the National Unity Government, and the different ethnic armed organizations, the ethnic representative groups, because as we all know, it's all about communication. I think the NUG also has that duty and responsibility and accountability, I would say, to communicate back to its constituents what's happening. Because, NUG acting as a government and showing itself to be a responsible counterpart also needs to now start, I think, gearing up to working, discussing, and threshing out what can be done to move the 5-point consensus implementation points forward. I'm referring to the NUG statement that was issued, looking forward to partnering with ASEAN in working out the specifics. And I think, hearing what Nimrod had said about, the aspirations, the expectations by the different ethnic groups, I think it's important to also, I think, start that two-way communication process, because understanding, I think, the way ASEAN, as this big lumbering machinery works, is important to be able to also, I think, communicate with our different constituents back in Myanmar on, why some of these expectations, which are so glaring and so, so important, and of course, should have been done yesterday kind of situation on the ground, why they don't seem to be met or being heard. So I think that's very important. How do we do that? And I think you asked about, expanding the participation, and also referring back to the point that Moe Zaw Oo brought up about the different rotational chairs. I've just been writing a review of the ASEAN Leaders Review and Decision document, and I think one point there that I would like to add on to the discussion about this expansion of the non-political representation, again, linking back to Indonesia's term as chair, in the ASEAN Charter, I think Article 31 to be exact, there is a provision about single ASEAN chairmanship of key meetings. Now, as chair, there are certain political level meetings at the ministerial and definitely summit level meetings that the chair has the discretion to assert its single chairmanship. But for the sectoral rotations, which follow different alphabetical rotations, is something that even the ASEAN chair, I think, needs to consider and with appropriate consultation decide upon. So what are these key meetings under the single ASEAN chairmanship? Most of the ASEANis in the audience will know what I'm talking about. It is the coordinating council meetings. For the political security, that's the foreign ministers. For the economic community, those are the ministers, the ASEAN economic ministers, as we call them. For the social cultural community, they are the ministers responsible for implementing the social cultural community. And there are these coordinating councils that fall under ASEAN chairmanship in addition to the summits. And of course, there are other key sectors that could easily come under consideration, at least skipping the rotational turn if there is enough, I think, a discussion and kind of consultation that perhaps Indonesia as ASEAN chair can try to do. I mean, it's a big task because there are so many meetings and sectoral activities going on. But I think it's time now for all of us to start looking at what are the important sectors, you know, defense, for example. Moe Zaw Oo cited the air chiefs. So the defense sector becomes important. And these are some of those points I think that we can start looking at when we look at whether or not the ministers, when they talk about considering this non-representation expansion, you know, to other sectors. Now, I'll just close with an observation about I think Indonesia's ability and nimbleness of response. It is a founding member of ASEAN. When the Myanmar crisis erupted in 2021, Brunei, then in Cambodia, which took up the chairmanship, are those that joined ASEAN later. Indonesia as a founding member, I think, how much of a lever, with Indonesia as in the chairman's seat in 2023, how much a lever can ASEAN make this whole process? And we talk about consultations and the difficulties of consulting. Let me put something on the table. Is it possible to have Myanmar-specific meetings as a means of those kinds of, facilitating consultation and possibly dialogue? I remember here, Evan, you were also at the ASEAN Roundtable, I believe. Former Foreign Minister Bapak Mati Natalegawa talking about having Myanmar stakeholders give their input at Myanmar-specific discussions. So I think these are kind of, in your carrot and stick portfolios, probably things we could try to discuss further about having all the key stakeholders attend Myanmar-specific meetings, which are made with the specific aim to discuss what needs to be done for the Myanmar people. And I think, going back to the humanitarian assistance thin end of the wedge, there have been some pronouncements made earlier about inclusive dialogues with that aim of humanitarian assistance. But, those indications and discussions were made before the airstrikes on the Kachin concert, and also the unfortunate repercussions that have arisen from targeted political assassinations and so on. So I'll stop there, and I apologize for taking more time than I should have.
Thank you so much. I thought that was a very insightful conversation, and certainly your idea on sort of repeating what Marty said in terms of having Myanmar-specific meetings is certainly something that we should consider further. And let me take that idea more and push it further and throw the question back to Mr. Moe Zaw Oo. Within the context of the idea that Mamo has mentioned, having a Myanmar-specific set of meetings, not necessarily an ASEAN meeting, but the chair can initiate a consultation set of meetings to discuss Myanmar. This would allow then the possibility of inviting different stakeholders in Myanmar. And going back to your earlier suggestion, Mr. Moe, that there needs to be coordinated efforts, not just to prevent the sham election, but also to prevent the atrocities by the military. What kind of role do you think that NUG and others can do in such a Myanmar-specific meetings to coordinate not just the stakeholders within Myanmar, but also coordinating with ASEAN, and in this particular instance with Indonesia, to work out a specific set of indicators and progress and timeline, but also coordinating with non-ASEAN stakeholders like China, Japan, and India. How would you envision such a Myanmar-specific meeting where let's say hypothetically NUG could be asked to contribute, how would NUG aim to address some of these coordination efforts, not just within Myanmar, but with also external partners? Mr. Moe, please.
Thank you. First of all, I agree with the idea of Myanmar-specific dialogue or Myanmar-specific meeting that Moe Thuzar raised. Because from the very beginning of the formation of our government, we sent the message to the ASEAN that we also need to be discussed and consulted about the implementation process of the so-called 5-point consensus, but we didn't have a chance. So I think that it's a very good time because the Indonesia is taking over the chairmanship of the ASEAN. So yeah, it is a very good. It would be a very good opportunity for the Indonesia as well to hold sort of stakeholder dialogues, because there are a lot of stakeholders in our countries. It's not only the national unity government, there are some ethnic resistance groups, and there are some civil society groups, civil disobedience groups, and some others as well. So all of these stakeholders need to be discussed and consulted very well. So I think even for the development of the implementation plan of the ASEAN 5-point consensus, I think the Indonesia need to invite all of these stakeholders and then consult with them about their ideas for the implementation process. Because the 5-point consensus itself might not have so many problems, but the problem would be with the implementation process. That is the reason why we also are trying to propose a ASEAN plus approach. We also need to invite some other countries as well, not only from the region, but also from the international community to take care of the implementation of the 5-point consensus. So first of all, the Indonesia needs to try to hold an stakeholder dialogue. And then I think Indonesia as the chair of the ASEAN also needs to invite some external countries for the consultation process of the implementation of the 5-point consensus plan. Thank you.
Thank you. Let me turn to Amara now. Assuming that Indonesia in some hypothetical scenario can actually facilitate, as Moe suggested, some sort of Myanmar-specific set of meetings without calling it an ASEAN meeting, and that in some magical scenario, in this particular instance, we can actually facilitate all of this necessary stakeholders. What sort of solution do you think the chair, as well as the other stakeholders, what sort of solution do you see realistically to come out from such a mechanism? Should we focus more on finding ways to manage the crisis without necessarily finding a political resolution? Or do you see that if we were able to find such a mechanism, we should just go all in and focus on a long-term political solution? What do you think, Amara?
I think there are, when we talk about the scenario planning, I think there are 5 possible outcomes, of course. And the first 2 is either party going to win, either NUG or SAC were going to control. And the third scenario is, as Minton said, trying to find the political solution and then follow the election later on and so on. And the fourth was, of course, the mediated term that, we consulted something and going on. The first thing is, having a long-term political solution will be difficult. I mean, I may be blunt, but it's pretty difficult. that a lot of dialogue have done before, and it's require a lot of consultation with the different stakeholders, armed stakeholders and non-armed stakeholders, and also other different small other ethnic groups too. So, but here's the fifth scenario that I always consider that I think is more important that people usually don't say. I think this is the scenario that Myanmar is going to become a failed state. That right now, the pain point for the mediation, the pain point for getting someone to, to bring in or to pressure is now focused on economy and also on the different people, the citizen itself. So it is very difficult, and that's going to lead to the failed state scenario. So I don't know that, what other scenarios will come out. It depends on the political will, objective of the different stakeholders, international response, and economic matters in the region. But I'm pretty sure that if we're putting so much pain point on economy and the citizen and the humanitarian as a kind of leverage to do something on, and it will definitely be a very disaster moment for not only Myanmar, for the region too, right? I mean, imagine in the upcoming 2 to 3 years, we got 5 to 10 million economic migrants and other humanitarian migrants in Thailand, and that will be the big regional issue. So I think what Indonesia do within upcoming year is not to just looking too much for the, maybe trying to change the political structural, but trying to create a platform. And the first priority should be not to de-escalate. And the second one is to try to prevent creating a platform that how the other stakeholders can coming in and let the stakeholders to decide what to do. And what ASEAN role in right now is trying to contain the crisis and trying to de-escalate. I think that this should be the priority for the ASEAN right now. And I think that will be the most pragmatic thing that Indonesia can do within a year of chairmanship. Thank you.
Thank you, Amara. Kuminzin, I think what Amara pointed out earlier, that the failed state scenario is something that many in ASEAN have been concerned about since the beginning of the coup last year, obviously. But what do you think is ASEAN's biggest challenge as it engages with the crisis to prevent that scenario? From your perspective, why is it so hard for ASEAN to create not just this platform, but also to get through to the stakeholders in Myanmar, to actually build that relationship with everyone, and also get its ideas forward? Some in ASEAN would say, since Myanmar has become a member of ASEAN, there should have been much more willingness to listen to ASEAN. And yet it seems like ASEAN's pleas have not been listened to. What do you think from the perspective of Myanmar? What do you think is ASEAN's greatest challenge now as it seeks to prevent that failed state scenario that Amara mentioned?
I think I want to be a bit more positive. I think we can be more creative in a way. I think this latest statement from the ASEAN Summit, the review and decision, in a way, some of the things are quite open to creative interpretation, right? What we need is political will and then technical skill to make sure that we interpret and we implement. So even Article 7 of the statement mentioned that, that the implementation plan. I think this is will be the most challenging thing for ASEAN, like implementation issue. And when we talk about like the title of this meeting, aspiration is like very, in a way, vision issue, right? Expectation is more about strategy. And then, well, we are now talking mainly about strategy, right? So I think you will have 3 elements. One is approach. What kind of approach? This is also mentioned in the statement, Article 14. I think it's mentioned about new approach should be pursued. Like, I might be not exact language, but this is what imply in the statement. So new approach. I think the approach is quite important. We need to be more like I would quote that Thomas Schelling insight. Basically, you have one like bargaining power. We have a capabilities to hurt the Burmese military, that the status quo is not sustainable. Status quo is costly for all of us. I think that's very important bargaining power. We can really use multi-pronged, in our pressure mechanism, right? Of course, ASEAN countries, individual country cannot go, economic and other type of sanctions. But I found that one article, I would say, I think Article 11 of the statement mentioned about accountability. And this is also very important because of like daily brutalities and atrocities. I think ASEAN could probably creatively explore possibility of how do we take action to prevent atrocities. Atrocity prevention could be one thing that we can link with the accountability. And when it comes to accountability, documentation alone and make it public alone can constrain aggressor, the bully behavior, because they know it will have a consequence. We are not ignoring, we are monitoring. We know you are violating these things. I think that's accountability thing need to be positively, creatively interpreted and then implemented as a part of the sanction or a part of the pressure. But I don't think the pressure alone is enough. What we need is how do we take advantage of these pressure and sanctions? I think that's what Thomas Schelling called diplomacy, right? Usually you need committed diplomatic effort to make sure your pressure and sanction will lead to resolution, not just figured punishment. So that's why I think it's important to have a new approach with combine both, practical, pressure mechanism that's already enshrined somewhat in ASEAN statement, recent statement, as I said, accountability issue, and also with that, a positive inducement. That's what we can figure out. It's not like that. We really need to think about approach issue that's in line with the thing. And the second point is mechanism. What type of mechanism? I think I will agree with Moe Zaw Oo in a way ASEAN Plus type of thing, but mainly for mobilizing public opinion, mobilizing consensus, mobilizing resource for humanitarian and other supports. But for the resolution, I think the crisis management, even for that minimum goal, what we need is not multilateral initiative. I think we need more minilateral initiative. ASEAN minus basically Indonesia. I would basically pick neighboring country, Thailand, India, China will be key players in this regard. What we need is these instead of inclusiveness, we should look for the impact. Instead of like lofty principle, we should look for a specific mission-driven task with this minilateral engagement. I think if we can do both multilateral to mobilize moral and the material support, and then minilateral to make impact and to get outcome, I think that would be good opportunity for Indonesia to initiate this minilateral engagement specifically focused on Myanmar. This is a mechanism part of the third part would be the entry point. What would be the good entry point for this minilateral approach? I think again, civilian protection and then the humanitarians are two important entry point for all of us, because since interestingly ASEAN mentioned accountability, picking out like basically emphasizing Burmese military as the strongest armed forces in the country is basically highlighting who is mainly responsible for the atrocities and brutality, right? So I think we can really go through that approach, mechanism, and entry point and see how it would like allow Indonesia to play more creatively based on the latest ASEAN Summit review and decision. Thank you.
Thank you. I thought that was a good way of structuring our mindset in terms of thinking about the approach, the mechanism, and the entry point, and find ways within the creative spirit of how to move forward. Nimrod, let me take the question to you. Within the same spirit that we need to find different approaches, a mechanism, and entry point, and within the spirit of creative discussion, for a long time, I think the premise of ASEAN's engagement seems to be, at least in public, to be split between, do we talk to the military or do we talk to NUG? But there isn't enough discussion about whether or not ASEAN should talk to the ethnic groups. So how would you suggest ASEAN if ASEAN were to find a way to bring in different stakeholders into the process, how would you suggest ASEAN engage the ethnic groups? Where does ASEAN start engaging with the ethnic groups? What's the entry point? Which ethnic groups should ASEAN engage in? Nimrod?
Yes, thank you so much. I think we welcome the recent decision by the ASEAN Summit. And I think with that decision, I hope that this will open up more opportunity for the ASEAN chair, the special envoy, even AHA, to engage with ERO, Ethnic Resistance Organization, or NUG, or the NUCC. Because to be honest, I think the recent approach is not very effective. And ASEAN engaging directly with the SEC has not achieved anything. But on the other hand, the ASEAN is still relevant to the current Myanmar conflict, and is supported by all the neighboring countries, for example, China, India, even UN and the West. And our democratic forces also welcome and actually invite ASEAN to talk with us. But I think because of the objection from the SAC, and ASEAN hesitate to engage with ERO or other stakeholders, is a strategy mistake. So that is why I would like to go back to what Amara mentioned earlier, to open up a more inclusive space. And I think in that reason, I think talking to in ethnic nationality, currently we have a K3C, where Karen, Karenni, Chin, and Kachin work together as a coordination group. And I think engaging with that directly to find out what the position, what we want to resolve the country problem, I think is very encouraging. And it is something as the new chairman and special envoy could do. And also, but I think engaging with different stakeholders will help ASEAN to understand what is really happening on the ground by listening to different stakeholders, especially from the ethnic nationality as well. And the last point I want to quote to what Papa, our vice chairman, said earlier. It is a time for ASEAN to test their unity and relevantness. So if ASEAN fail to engage with different stakeholders, if ASEAN fail to resolve the Myanmar conflict, it means ASEAN is not relevant to the conflict resolution in the region anymore. Thank you.
Thank you. That was a very strong indictment, I think, and it's one that I think we in ASEAN should pay serious attention to. Before I open up the floor for questions, let me ask Moe Thuzar the last question. You mentioned earlier about the importance of implementation guideline for the 5-point consensus. Now that we've heard from different stakeholders and viewpoints, do you think Indonesia as chair should develop this implementation guideline collectively with different stakeholders? For example, soliciting input from maybe the ethnic groups, maybe from the NUG, maybe others, and then have an inclusive process in the creation of the implementation guideline. Should it work with the SAC still to work on those implementation guidelines? Or should it work with external partners, non-ASEAN partners, China, India, Japan, and others, to develop that implementation guideline? What do you think is what you think is ideal for Indonesia to move forward in developing that implementation guideline?
Thank you, Evan. Wow, very important question. I think here, we have to refer back to what's been agreed upon recently, right? And I think that's the framework that Indonesia as the incoming chair can build upon and take forward. So consulting with all stakeholders, all relevant stakeholders to find those constructive outcomes to the current multi-layered crisis is the mandate from the 5-point consensus. And I think Gomindin and Nimrod and Amara and Moe Zaw Oo to different degrees have also highlighted to the audience in their discussions about I think the creative initiatives that Indonesia as chair can do. So Indonesia as chair can I think, initiate the process. And because Indonesia as chair is also going to be steering or being the lead voice, at least for 2023, with regard to what's being done for the implementation plan, the specific measurable indicators. I think it is within the chair's initiative and prerogative to undertake those kinds of activities, actions at multilateral levels and so on with interested partners to have those discussions. So I think it is well within the chair's mandate to start reaching out to the important stakeholders for their input. It is well within the chair's mandate to be creative and bringing together minilateral discussions. Maybe there will be several minilaterals involving stakeholder inputs and so on to talk about it. Because the leaders have tasked the foreign ministers to come up with that plan that will give that framework for broader accountability. So I think we really need to think about how, chairmanship and leadership, the two qualities, can find that kind of convergence under Indonesia's experience and wisdom and the creative initiatives, which, I've seen so much also emanating from track 2 inputs like those that CSIS Indonesia convenes. So I think that's my input. We really need to look at the prerogative, the leeway which the leaders document has also given to specific ASEAN institutions, including the ASEAN chair, to take it forward, bearing in mind that all of us are trying to find a way to help the people in Myanmar who have done nothing to deserve what they're going through.
Thank you so much. Let me now open up the floor for questions from the audience here. If there's any particular questions to the speakers, both here and online. Yes, please. Please state your name, where you're from, and to whom are you addressing the question to?
Thank you, everyone. My name is Muhammad. I'm a director of the Center for Policy Strategy for Asia Pacific and Africa in MOFA. I specifically posed these questions to Ms. Moe Thuzar and Mr. Moe Zaw Oo. I think one of the instrumental structural problems that we are having in the case of Myanmar, and this is not really discussed widely in this session, regarding with the Myanmar constitution itself, where the constitution gave specific powerful positions to the junta, to the military. And I remember it's quite similar with Indonesian case in the past, but it takes a couple years to have a chance to gradually change. And the others, which is related also as an instrumental structural problem, is related to the principle of ASEAN, where we have principle of non-interference. And every member, I think, sees or treat this principle as a separate principles with the good governance, rule of law. But I think this is actually intertwined principles. I mean, you can just cherry pick one of the principles as you wish, suit with your interest, I think. And this is a problem for ASEAN member state to resolve. The second, I think, how do we reconcile this structural problem? This is my questions to the speakers. The other questions, Indonesia just recently indicated the tagline of the chairmanship next year is about ASEAN matters, epicentrum of growth. My questions to you all, do you sense that this tagline is not quite represents the political spectrum in ASEAN, such as in the case of Myanmar, because it's more about economy. How do we feel if you sense the gap during the year of work for the 2013 chairmanship? Thank you.
Thank you so much, Pa. I thought those are two excellent questions, particularly on the Constitution and the ASEAN Charter, and then a very interesting question about where ASEAN chair's new theme, which is the epicentrum of growth, fits within all of this. Let me first give the floor to Mr. Moe Zaw Oo, if you would like to respond to the question raised. Mr. Moe?
Yes, thank you. First of all, regarding the Constitution, we heard that ASEAN, in the ASEAN, there is a divided opinion on how to approach the issues of Myanmar, especially some of the root causes of the problem of our country. So some of the countries would like to address the superficial issue like the removing the military coup and go back to the status quo before the attempted military coup. But I would like to say that the problem in our country is not only about the removal of the military coup. Now it is much, much deeper than that. So we also need to, the ASEAN should also need to address the root causes of our country, which is also about the constitutional crisis. So we cannot accept at all the current 2000 constitution. The people will not accept that at all. So we need to replace it with the democratic and federal form of the constitution, which we are now proposing to do. So I think the ASEAN should also think about that as well. When it comes to the addressing the problem of our country, it is not only about the bring in some stakeholders to the negotiation table and just let them talk or things like that. It is also about how to deal with all of these root causes of our country. The most important part of that root causes is the constitution. So that is a reason why we are proposing to draft in the new constitution, and then only after the new constitution has been drafted and approved, then we will be able to hold new elections. So we are not rejecting the election outrightly, but the elections must be held only after the new constitution has been drafted and approved in our country. Otherwise, there will be no genuine form of solution that we can seek in our country. Thank you.
Thank you. Moe Thuzar?
Thank you. Thank you, Pak Mohammed, for the questions. And I also thank Moe Zaw Oo for taking the first stab at it and also, adding his thoughts. The structural problems, I mean, the way I see it, and I think there have been strands of this that previous speakers on the panel have also been alluding to. But you see, when we're looking at, I think trying to sit down and talk about, helping Myanmar, finding a solution or finding some constructive outcomes to the current Myanmar crisis. I think what ASEAN can do is, again, bringing people together to the table to discuss what is most pressing and what ASEAN can do to help the Myanmar people, I think, get back on that road to transition and democratization. But I think ASEAN is also very careful not to be seen as, telling the Myanmar people, let me emphasize the Myanmar people, what to do. I mean, what ASEAN wants to do is to help the Myanmar people. But the future of the Myanmar people, I think, is something that ASEAN, of course, accepts is in the hands of the people of Myanmar. So I think that's how we need to understand this whole thing about the principle of non-interference. And in this context, I'm always reminded of what the late Mr. Severino has highlighted many, many times. ASEAN can and has in the past justified intervention when it comes to the situation in a particular member state potentially affecting regional stability and security. So clearly, all the interventions that ASEAN has made towards situations, what's been happening in Myanmar in the past, we can go back to the 2003 Debayan incident, the 2007 Saffron Revolution, the 2008 Nagas, and the Rohingya exoduses, the boat people crisis that we have experienced, emanating from Myanmar, 2012, 15, 2016, and 17. So all these instances, and particularly, of course, after 2021, I think what ASEAN has been doing is trying to hold to that thing. If something is happening in a member state that has the potential to affect regional stability and security, then ASEAN as a family member needs to help. And I think that's how we will, I think, contextualize non-interference in this context. The second comment or the question about Indonesia's ASEAN theme, the epicentrum of growth. If we link back to what Goh Min Sin has highlighted, and also I think what Amara mentioned about, what are the pressing priorities when it comes to looking at everything that seems to be crumbling now in Myanmar. It's the economy, it's all the attendant knock-on consequences that have come from, I think, the humanitarian needs arising from conflict situations, as well as the potential of climate-induced natural disasters, human-induced disasters, and so on, and all of those consequences. So I think if we look at that, then, of course, growth, economic growth and development, and having, I think, all the member states, the peoples and communities in the ASEAN family participating in that growth is important. So I think we also need to look at, how we understand and interpret the different dimensions of an ASEAN theme or a logo. After all, I mean, themes and logos usually are kept intentionally broad so that there can be different strands of implementation and interpretation, isn't it?
Thank you so much. Anyone else from the audience who would like to ask questions? Nobody else? Oh, sorry. We have a few online. From Romain. I think this is something that we discussed throughout the session about the election, but I think what is important about this particular question to all the speakers is particularly, how would you like ASEAN to respond if there is what presumably there will be some form of an announcement of whatever form of election that the SAC plans to hold next year? How do you think ASEAN, and in this particular case, I guess Indonesia as well as the chair of ASEAN, how would you suggest they respond? Let me start with Amara. What do you think, Amara? How do you think ASEAN should respond if there is an announcement by the SAC of an election?
Okay, my answer will be quite blunt. I always believe in the negotiated mediation and always believe in the political settlement, right? So, I mean, no matter what, I mean, whether ASEAN is supported or whether international community is supported or not, the election was still going on. This is what military regime usually did, and they have done it before. So it will go on, and they will just go on. So, but the interesting part is, after the election, there may be some form of new actors who are coming up, and there will be some form of new arrangement or mechanism, at least for the SAC title coming up. So at least maybe there was some dynamic that we can start looking on as a new form of factor that we can consider for creating some form of dialogue too. So I think ASEAN is Japan. I believe as ASEAN as an institution, what you say is maybe they will just stay focus more on the election, how they implement the election, whether it's free and fair, and that will be what they will gonna do on. But different ASEAN member states have a different response, I believe so. But at the same time, SAC will go on wherever it is, and the same time, NUG will go on with their own trying to tackle this fundamental problem. But what I'm looking on is as far as there is some form of political trying to seek for the political solution, that is always valid, and they should go on, and then we should focus more on the political resolution rather than trying to escalate the tension. I think this is my position right now. It may be biased, but this is what I am. Yeah. Thank you.
Thank you, Amara. Let me ask Kominzin then. You spoke earlier about entry points, right? Is there any scenario under which, if we take Amara's point that regardless of what ASEAN's response will be, the SAC will insist that the election of some form will go on. Is there any conditions under which this election provides one entry point for ASEAN to facilitate a more sort of political dialogue or discussion, or should ASEAN just completely treat this as a non-starter and won't even engage and won't even acknowledge?
I think ASEAN, most of the ASEAN country at least, and also neighboring country like such as China, India, Thailand, I think they tend to take more agnostic position, don't make any comment and wait and see if things change, like to what at least, better than this. So it's kind of like something is better than nothing approach they are adopting now. But the question is, who defined this something? I think that's my key issue. If the something is, something closer to the will of people of Myanmar, or that's even like technically speaking, that something is in a way to allow all stakeholders in Myanmar to have some kind of equilibrium, that will lead to further opening. Of course, we don't expect, 100% democracy or federalism in the next 3 to 5 years. What we are talking now is not much about aspiration and long term, mainly about next 3 to 5 years, medium term, like the objective. I think that some kind of transitional arrangement is needed, right? That go ahead with the election the way that the Burmese military is now preparing is unacceptable. Unacceptable, as I said, practically, politically, morally unacceptable. So I think like that message need to be communicated. Not only ASEAN, I think ASEAN as Indonesia should reach out to the external, partners. Right? That's what in the review and decision statement of the Article 13 mentioned. I think that China, India need to be informed that this election would not bring stability with the way it is right now. So I think that the stability is very important for neighboring country to be more alert. So to me, I think it's important. The agnostic approach, opportunistic approach, is not helpful for ASEAN and neighboring country to feel assured that will go away with one election, right? That's one thing. Another thing is I think we need to communicate among ourselves, within ourselves, like basically China, India, Thailand, and Indonesia, and also communicate the SAC. If you go ahead with this, of course we cannot, have an enforcing leverage. We all know as a reality, but this will not lead to resolution, even mitigation, even management. So because this is a very unilateral way. So I think that's what I think we should start. Maybe like one unilateral conversation is about this election, right? How do we make sure we communicate to the SAC? Look, this is not the right way. I mean, my main concern, as I said, if we allow this happen, the country it's more like path dependent option, right? So it will lock the country in for another 5 years of very, very dangerous and very, very negative spiral of conflict for all of us.
Thank you. Speaking of neighboring country and the prospect of stability, certainly this relates to the role of the ethnic groups as well. And I think one of the conversations and debates over this potential sham election is to what extent will there be participation from some of the political wing of the ethnic groups? Nimrod, what do you think from the perspective of the ethnic groups of not just the potential of the participation of some within the sham elections, but also how would you like to have ASEAN engage the ethnic groups on this particular specific issue? Are there particular positions or issues that ASEAN should be speaking to when it comes to elections with the ethnic groups?
I think it's a big question, but KNU is the first organization armed ethnic groups that already announced that we don't support these upcoming elections. And I think there are a few reasons. The same military that reject the previous election that happened in 2020, which claiming that it's illegitimate. And then not the same military want to hold another election. So it is difficult to understand when they want to have an election where the previous election was announced as supported and open to and supported by the international community. And I think what is said earlier, ASEAN should come up with a clear position of how they want to see Myanmar move forward. And as Siamizin and also Amara mentioned earlier, we want a durable solution in Myanmar. And I think election in Myanmar is not really resolve the current conflict, the long-standing root cause of Myanmar problem. So I think ASEAN should look into beyond the election and how to engage with ERO and how to engage with different stakeholders and how to find a more a political solution that really resolve the conflicts that we have right now. Otherwise, we can have an election, but then in the election, there might be violence, and then the new emerging government might not really resolve the current conflicts that we have. And this is a challenge. And I think this is the issue that ASEAN, the new ASEAN chairman and special envoy should look into.
Thank you. Is there one more question online? Sorry, I couldn't. There's a question here, I think, by one of our participants on Indonesia's role in particular in terms of shaping and influencing the whole of ASEAN, when in fact not everyone within ASEAN agrees on how to deal with the Myanmar crisis, and that some ASEAN member states, according to this participant, do not necessarily take this issue very seriously. And I think this raises an important question as well about SAC itself. I think Amara mentioned, you mentioned earlier, Amara, that even if, regardless of ASEAN's response, that the SAC will continue to have its form of election of some kind. My question to you, Amara, and this picks up on that point by Andrew on the online question. Does SAC really care what ASEAN does? Can SAC just simply ignore whatever ASEAN wants? Or are there things that the SAC still cares about ASEAN? And that is one thing that the chair, in this case Indonesia, can actually use to change the behavior. What your earlier response seems to be from the earlier question is that there isn't much of a record of internal change, sorry, externally induced change. But within the specific context of ASEAN, for you, Amara, does the SAC still care what ASEAN thinks about itself? Amara?
It depends. I mean, it's also always depends on how ASEAN can engage in the on the track twos and the back door, and how you build the trust, right? I mean, if we still going on with the kind of tweeting diplomacy, we call, you go for the one meeting and then you tweet it a lot, everyone tweeted a lot, and the series of how can I say, the cancel culture thing on social media coming in, I think then everything will be collapsed in the first one or two meeting in the beginning, right? So it's always matter on the trust building, and ASEAN should always getting into the very, at Community it's a kind of a mini lateral there. You have to build trust. It will take about a few months if you even do, proactively. And then we can start looking it on, and then how they wanted to go on, and then what's their solution, right? I mean, they have their own solution. They all knew that the ongoing conflict was not going to end with the election. They they understood on that, and they all knew that in the international community will not simply accept because of election. They all aware of this thing, and they all aware that it will take longer than they expected. So that's what ASEAN and Indonesia should go on, is more proactive, multilateral, very low-key engagement, building a trust, and seek the solution, and then listen what they really want to do, and then we can provide more consultation together. So this is a kind of Indonesia as a multilateral mediators, and I think you have an experience on this thing. So I think Indonesia can go on with that for sure.
Thank you. Not to put words into the conversation, but I want to contrast what you just said, Amara, with Moe Thuzar's suggestion that Indonesia develops an enforceable a way to make the junta accountable and have this implementation guideline. I think what Amara, if I take you correctly, Amara, what you're saying is that you have to build the trust, you have to use the conversation low key, less high profile, and move forward. But if we take Moe Thuzar's idea that Indonesia has an implementation guideline, wouldn't that anger SAC if Indonesia were to come up with a set of key benchmarks, and if you don't meet it, there's going to be particular suspensions or sanctions? Wouldn't that actually reduce trust if Indonesia has this implementation guideline? So Moe Thuzar, what do you think? Should we still focus on low key, not angering the SAC, and build that trust, or should we just put forward a list of 10 steps, and if you don't meet these steps every 2 months, there's going to be particular enforcement or sanctions? Moe Thuzar?
Okay, thanks, Evan, and thanks, Amara, for the questions. And I think let's not make this Amara versus Moe, Amara Thiha versus Moe Thuzar type of discussion. I think the main point here is we're doing this to try to implement the 5-point consensus, the 5-point consensus priorities that remain unmet, and to give effect to the leaders' review and decision on the implementation of the 5-point consensus. So what I'm saying is not Indonesia must do this, is Indonesia as ASEAN chair starting to lead the process for ASEAN on giving effect to what the ASEAN leaders have just agreed to. And then maybe I should just answer the question with another question. I would have thought that what ASEAN has been trying to do since 2021 really was to try and build some kind of trust and try to talk to and reach out to the State Administration Council. If anything, I think most of the excoriations that ASEAN has been facing by many analysts and commentators is having been too accommodating, if you will. So I think here we really need to look at trust building in all its aspects. And then again, going back to what Go Minzin has highlighted so succinctly about the interpretations. What does it mean? What does trust building mean to the different parties? And of course, we are also assuming that there is a good faith in that as well. So I think that's where I'm coming from. I'm looking at it very much as Indonesia as chair of ASEAN for 2023, not Indonesia unilaterally leading it, but looking at the scope that Indonesia as chair for 2023 has to entrench certain practices to carry forward. Because let's not forget, 2024, the chair will rotate again. And Ivan, I think you've already highlighted the nature of all these alphabetical rotations. We've got a new ASEAN Secretary General coming in from Cambodia, and that person will be at the helm of the ASEAN Secretariat for the next 5 years. So we need to look at all these different timelines as well.
Thank you. Yes, it's certainly not a Moe Thuzar versus Amara debate. I certainly made that up, but I do think it's important to highlight, I think, both the perils and the promises of engaging the SAC. I see that there's more questions online. We have one question from Ye Kang Oo. Can an average Myanmar citizen who is currently living under the military rule expect the conditions to be improved at least for the next 3 years, realistically speaking? Can ASEAN help in any way regarding humanitarian aid and economic delivery? And the second question, and I think this is directly to Mr. Moe Zaw Oo, what's the next step for NUG to nullify the sham election rather than an armed response? And UCC does not seem to be making progress either. So in these conditions, how can ASEAN or Myanmar's neighbors help in reaching a political resolution? Mr. Moe?
Thank you for the question. So I wanted to talk about the, I don't want to call it the elections because it's not elections at all. So I don't know how to call it. But anyway, I will call it sham elections. This will be the sham and false and unlawful and illegitimate. And it is very important, I think, not to expect it as an exit strategy out of the status quo. We should not expect anything out of this illegitimate and sham elections because nobody in the country, the whole people will not support it at all. So the NUG or the NUCC or CRPH or ethnic resistance groups, most of the ERO will not support and participate and agree with that sham and illegitimate elections. So if the ASEAN or any country trying to support the elections, it means that it is supporting the killings, bombing, and torturing people all across the country. Because of military junta, it is attempted to stabilize the country in the name of creating a conducive condition for the so-called elections. And I would say that according to some studies about one-sided elections in conflict-affected countries, that kind of so-called elections will never resolve conflict. Instead, it is very likely that such so-called elections will trigger increased violence and wars and crisis. So elections conducted without the agreement of key stakeholders and through deeply contested process are perceived as illegitimate, and it will lead to instability, further polarization, and post-elections chaos. So some case studies of Liberia, Burundi, South Sudan, and then Angola showed that elections conducted without adequate prior agreement resulted in poor outcomes. So I would like to say that the election, the so-called election, would not be the solution at all. Thank you.
Thank you. Yes, we have a question from the audience.
Thank you very much. I think there was one here as well. So there's two of us.
Yeah, okay. You first and then Nyanta. Yeah,
thank you. Thank you. So John from the British Embassy, if I may ask an idealistic question.
To whom, please?
Just to the whole panel, really, anyone who wishes to comment. There's a great deal of evidence that Russia has been arming the military junta for a long time now, since the coup. What is ASEAN's the perspectives on this? I'd be very interested to hear whether there's any perspectives, any attempt to try and stop that transfer of armaments to the military junta from Russia. Thank you.
Thank you. Nyanta? So we'll just collect the two questions and then we'll have all the speakers addressed.
Hi, Nyanta from Myanmar. My question, I think, really to Amara, but I think I would also invite the other speakers as well to comment. Do you feel there is a tension for ASEAN and for Indonesia in its upcoming role to be thinking of how to engage with the ICC? Because I see this, I hear this, I think there's some assumption where when you think about the military in Myanmar as an institution, it is perfectly understandable to assume its centrality, given its history, given its embeddedness and its entrenchedness in the country. But in the context of what's happening now, right, over the past year and a half, do you feel we have an issue, this tension where the military may not necessarily be able to maintain that centrality? It's not. I don't mean the people of Myanmar are reviled by or repulsed by the military. That in itself is not new, but it's also the fact that it is increasingly losing control of territory. And we don't have to get into a discussion of whether that means the NUG or the resistance or the various opposition actors in turn are gaining control of territory. We'll put that to one side. What is undeniable is that the military is losing control of territory. It is losing control of the economy. And most importantly, it's even by your own, I think, admission, it sounds like people in the military know that running these, I agree with the deputy minister, running these sham elections, even they don't seem to be convinced themselves that it will result in any major shift in domestic political dynamics. So the military certainly has the ability to be a spoiler, right? In the sense that it has, this is the question for ASEAN. This is the question for Indonesia. How do you deal with, I don't know, one of you said this major, what we think of as the largest armed force in the country of Myanmar. That is an undeniable political weight, but it is also not necessarily central. It is not being accorded that anymore. It is not able to maintain that anymore. And how then do you think of intervention? You're talking of creative intervention. I'd like to see some clear definition of that. You're talking about track 2, you're talking about engagement, but there's a difference between engaging a spoiler versus engaging what is potentially a central institution. And I don't think it is the latter anymore. And I think that's reflected by the reality on the ground. Thank you.
Thank you for those 2 questions. Since we are running out of time, let me do this. I think there's 2 key last questions here. One is sort of the role of Russia, which we know of obviously is a key leverage holder as well, particularly with the SAC as a non-external, external non-ASEAN stakeholder that we have to figure out how to engage. But I think the question from Nyanta is very crucial for the discussion, because I think for the past hour and a half or so, we've been talking about options to implement the 5-point consensus, and yet we sort of skirt around this problem of engagement with the SAC itself. It's sort of come up, but we haven't really dealt with this. So if I can invite all of the speakers to respond to whichever of these 2 key points, whether it's about the role of Russia, or I think more importantly about the engagement with SAC, address these questions, but also add on your last impressions and statements in 5 minutes so that we can end in exactly at 3 here. Let me start with Mr. Moe Zaw Oo. The floor is yours.
Thank you. I just would like to make a final remark. I just would like to request the ASEAN to address the root causes of our country, not only the superficial or the short-term solution of our countries, because the situation in the country is very much complex. So ASEAN needs to consult with all the stakeholders in our country, even before the ASEAN develops its implementation plan. Thank you.
Thank you. Next we have Amara. Last thoughts and remarks.
Yes, I would like to bring the first thing that I mentioned in the panel, that, of course, I agree with Kuan that, but what I would say is military is not monolithic. as Koreans say, there is always dynamic in there. And I always say that there will always have an adaptability. So of course they are losing control of the land and they are losing the economic up front, and then they have a difficult situation. But at the same time, they adapted and they try to bring on their own strategy. This is something we need to know, right? I mean, we should not say just this, atrocities and making atrocities and all this fighting is a one part, but at the same time, how they evolve in time and how they're trying to overcome. That is something that we always need to know, and we always need to engage, and we always need to study on this part. Otherwise, putting in the one thing as a stable variable, we're not gonna, creating the environment to solve the problem. So I think yes, it's a matter to putting on whether they are the spoiler or whether they are the stakeholders or whether they are the decision maker or not. But one thing for sure is, of course, they are still monopolizing the violence, and that means they have authority to do so. So I think this is something when we need to solve the problem, we also need to aware and looking on how do we gonna position and how we gonna engage with them. And this is something that is, whether we like it or not, this is something we have to, do it if we want to solve the problem. Thank you.
Thank you. Komitsin?
I would say I think back to Yanda's question. I don't think this is a time for good faith political engagement with the SAC because of the brutality and atrocity. But I think I just want to push back a bit. When you talk about the SAC, I mean, the junta is losing territory to, don't mention about whoever, right, to any ethnic groups or resistance. I think we need to mention, because the driver of conflict in Myanmar is complex, not just between the beast versus, beauty. It has so many intra-ethnic, inter-region, even now intergenerational tension. So if you really say SAC is losing, but the question for regional countries and the question for analysts is this: it will create vacuum, because you have that, the in armed conflict. When you say the brutal, the state, the state actor is losing, but the question is, who are the non-state actors trying to occupy that losing space? And in this case, in the conflict map in Myanmar, it's very complex. It's I'm not sure we can count UWSA as a resistance movement the way that we understand now. Or we can count the intention of Arakan Army as the way that NUG would prefer to define. The way that even Kachin, and so I think it's very complex. We should not be complacent in downplaying that complexity, but it does not justify autocracy. That's a very important, it's very nuanced. So I think if you start talking about SAC is losing territory without clearly articulating who is going to fill the vacuum with the unified vision and unified strategy, then the question will be who's going to fill the vacuum? Then in a way, we will invite neighboring country in ASEAN. Wow, we are so fearful, because that will be a real fail state scenario, right? So I think it's very important for the resistance movement, not just saying that SAC is losing territorial control, but we have unified vision. We have unified strategy. We have unified, I'm just saying like this. This is not return to normalcy. I think right now, some of the resistance movement actors, they tend to see this conflict as, these guys, the military took power from us. We will take this back power. So it's like a mentality of dethroned king. You're being removed from your throne, so you want to take it back. Instead of following this paradigm, I think we should really come up with the new paradigm, which is we are creating, alternative vision, alternative system, alternative, plan of unifying all these different forces. Otherwise, the challenge is, diplomats and all these foreign countries, they have their own priorities. They will see this as a big vacuum because of this armed conflict. They will see this as a low intensity anarchy. No one is really taking in charge of the landscape. So I think like for all of us, it's very important, not just congratulating or celebrating SAC is losing. We need to come up with the better alternative vision and system. Otherwise, I think that the more we talk about SAC is losing the ground, the more you trigger fear among the China, India, Thailand, and ASEAN, because the vacuum will create a lot of mess in all these failed or fragile state. Thank you.
Thank you, Goh Min Jin. Nimrod?
Thank you. I want to make 3 points here. I think the first one is, of course, the atrocity by SAC and it discriminate against, attack against our civilian is really alarming. And I think ASEAN should really look into the issue and how we stop the jet fuel, how we stop the money flow, how we stop the bank financial support to SAC is really important. And the second point is we really need humanitarian assistance, not only under the SAC control, but also in other ethnic areas. So how can ASEAN work with Thailand and India to open up the border and to support the humanitarian cross-border assistance, and how those benefits they could gain from working with us. And I think the third point is our inspiration to build a federal democratic country in the future. And this is something, it should not be a threat to China or a neighboring region. It should be something supported by the regional key stakeholder as well as a country, because there will be the key solution of Myanmar conflict. Thank you.
Thank you so much. And Moe Thuzar, you have the last word.
Thank you. I think the discussion can and should continue, so let's not make this the last word. But yes, for this panel, for the purposes of this panel, let me just try to compose my thoughts all together, bearing in mind what all the speakers have said. I think Goh Min Jin made an excellent point about, being clear-eyed about the realities. And I think that's very important. ASEAN needs to be clear-eyed about the realities of what's happening in Myanmar. And at the same time, I think all of us also need to be clear-eyed about what ASEAN can or cannot do for the people of Myanmar within the bounds of the intergovernmental cooperation that it has set itself. I think ASEAN, I think being clear-eyed about that will help us try to move the discussion forward. And again, when I talk about, again, I'll go back to my hobby horse, which is, we need to bring people together to talk and discuss. And I think maybe that's where ASEAN's convening power unilaterally among the different key stakeholders of Myanmar is important, without prejudging who holds the more so-called predominant or influencing a variable in an equation that has become very complex to solve. I think we need to also bear in mind that what's been thrown up since 2021 is really those complex challenges of internal unity and the still ongoing quest for reconciliation. Those are the unfinished businesses that the communities and the peoples in Myanmar need to continue. But I think what ASEAN can feasibly do to have that dialogue, to bring that dialogue within the mandate of what the 5-point consensus and the ASEAN chair and the special envoy have all been given, I think is the main thing here. And I think so. I can't stress enough. I think it may sound weak, but talking is better than shooting people in the street. If we can actually get the shooting to stop and people to at least sit down across the table to talk about why they are doing what they're doing and what their aspirations are, at least we can stop the shooting. And I think that's one of the main priorities that ASEAN has been thinking about. Let me just finally close by saying what Go Nimrod has raised just now is very important. Let's bring it back to practicalities and what we can do for the immediate needs of the people who are suffering. And if we can have conversations on those very practical, real and pressing challenges, I think this is something that nobody can deny is important, political aspirations aside. So I think when we start discussions, mini-lats with partners, particularly partners that border Myanmar, we need to start with those practical considerations that have an impact for the people and the communities in Myanmar.
Thank you so much. I personally felt, learned a lot from this session. I think we certainly need to have more of these conversations, not dominated by what ASEAN would like to see happen, but dominated by the views from our friends in Myanmar from across the board. And I think this is what's been very useful about these forums that CSIS has been organizing, is to actually let our friends from Myanmar speak for themselves, give them the platform to provide input for the rest of us here in ASEAN. And I think I certainly feel like we learned a lot today from these very difficult issues and questions, and certainly I think crucial for Indonesia as chair, because I think Indonesia, like many within ASEAN, still cling on to some of our old assumptions about how to engage Myanmar. And if there's anything we learned over the past year and a half or so, is that whatever our assumptions have been about Myanmar, I think needs to be reevaluated. And I think this is a good way to get the process started. Let me invite everyone to give a big round of applause for our speakers. Thank you so much. I think we have a break, but I'll leave it back to the MC.
Thank you. Thank you so much for your efforts, Dr. Laksmana. Ladies and gentlemen, we will now have a short 15-minute coffee break before reconvening for the second session. Now we will now have time to reconnect our thoughts, reconnect some of our scribbled notes before reconvening in 15. Thank you so much. Ladies and gentlemen, we will shortly begin the second session. Please kindly reconvene back to your seat as we will move forward with the second session. Thank you.
Good afternoon, everyone. Please be seated. We will continue the next session, which is a very interesting session, definitely, for the next hour or so. So I think in the first session, we have listened to the expectations and aspirations from our colleagues in Myanmar, particularly on Indonesia's chairmanship in ASEAN. And in this second session, we would like to hear similar in a similar way, the expectations and aspirations, particularly from our regional counterparts, which are coming from the relevant actors, which Evan mentioned as a non-ASEAN external partners or actors that really have the stake interest in Myanmar, and I think sharing the same vision with ASEAN as well on how this crisis can be solved. And we are very, very fortunate that today we have here physically with us the first Ambassador Igor Grisman, the Ambassador of the European Union to ASEAN, and European Union Special Envoy for Myanmar. And also we have Ambassador Deng Sichun, Ambassador of the People's Republic of China to ASEAN. So initially, actually, we extended the invitation to the UN Special Envoy, as well as the Thai Special Envoy to Myanmar, and the Japanese Special Envoy to Myanmar. But of course, because of certain reasons, they can't make it to our event. Hopefully, we can engage with them in other occasions as well. So I think, again, I think in session one, again, we have listened to so many inputs from Myanmar friends about what Indonesia should do, what ASEAN should do, regarding the developments in Myanmar. And a lot of challenges definitely there, but certainly I think we agree a lot of opportunities as well. It really depends on how we can push, for this progress, for the breakthrough in the upcoming future in Myanmar. But definitely, I think from the discussion, we'll also listen. I think that a lot of experts, the speakers that we have just now, they mentioned about the role of China, the role of even the European Union, European countries as well. The major powers, the regional actors, on how they should support Myanmar. And even from the NUG representative just now, the Deputy Foreign Minister mentioned about the ASEAN Plus effort. And now we would like to hear from our colleagues here about how they can support ASEAN effort in this particular context. So basically, the general question that we would like to explore in this session is, how is the general expectations towards Indonesia's leadership in ASEAN next year in the context of Myanmar crisis? And I would like to start with the opening question, same question for both speaker excellencies here. As we know, there has been plenty of hope and expectations to Indonesia's chairmanship in helping to push and facilitate the resolution of the Myanmar issue. How would you respond to such notion? What does China and European Union expect and hope from Indonesia's chairmanship in ASEAN? So within that context, I would like to first put forward the question to Ambassador Deng Xijun. In the context of, as we know, the regional powers, they certainly have their particular interests in Myanmar as well as in the region. But in your opinion, how should ASEAN manage the Myanmar issue while also balancing between the interests between many stakeholders, including the regional countries and major powers like China? So how do you respond to this question, Ambassador, please?
Thank you. Good morning to all my friends here. First of all, I would like to express my gratitude to CSIS for inviting me to this regional dialogue and share my views with all the participants here.
Maybe split a little bit closer.
Okay. So, first of all, I would like to express my gratitude to CSIS for inviting me to this regional dialogue and focus on Myanmar issue. And I'm glad to have this opportunity to share my views with all the friends here. On your question, you see China's position on Myanmar issue is consistent and clear. We have been upholding an objective and just attitude and actively working on relevant parties in Myanmar and making every effort to promote peaceful talks. China supports Indonesia's active role in mediating the Myanmar issue after taking over the rotating chair of ASEAN next year. And I also would like to take this opportunity to elaborate on China's 3 expectations in this regard. First, help Myanmar in pursuit of continuous political reconciliation within the framework of its constitution and the laws, and encourage all political parties in Myanmar to prioritize the interests of the nation and its people, take rational and pragmatic efforts, accommodate and understand each other, and take into account the reasonable demands of all sides so as to restore stability and achieve peace at an early date. Second, encourage Myanmar to restart the democratic transition process, realize the vision of returning power to its people, and explore a path of political development with Myanmar's characteristics and in line with Myanmar's national conditions. Third, give full play to the role of ASEAN. China supports ASEAN to uphold the ASEAN way, stay committed to the basic principles and the traditions of non-interference in internal affairs and a consensus-based approach, stay focused and engaged in patient coordination to implement the 5-point consensus orderly together with Myanmar and safeguard the overall solidarity and the leading role of ASEAN. So I will stop here. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Ambassador. I think that's very, very important points that you mentioned about how China's position has been very consistent to promote the peaceful process in Myanmar and to support Indonesia's role. And the 3 expectations, I think, very, very important that you mentioned about helping Myanmar to pursue political reconciliation, that all political parties must prioritize the Myanmar people's interests, and encourage Myanmar to be in the democratic transition process and support the role of ASEAN in the sense that ASEAN is putting forward the consensus way, non-interference, and like all parties need to be patient regarding the 5-point consensus implementation. But in this context, I would like to ask you further question regarding how do you think China can help ASEAN to pursue its mission in Myanmar? Because as you mentioned, China is very much supporting ASEAN's role in this context. So how do you respond to this, Ambassador? How China do you think can help in this respect?
Thank you for your question. Since the change of political situation in Myanmar, China has always upheld an objective and a fair attitude and made every effort to promote peaceful dialogue. We have been in close communication with ASEAN on the Myanmar issue and support ASEAN chair and its special envoy in playing a positive role. China calls on ASEAN member state to stick to the ASEAN way, maintain ASEAN unity, and work constructively with Myanmar to implement the 5-point consensus so as to make important contributions to the proper handling of differences through political dialogue and the restoration of stability and development in Myanmar at an early date. Among the 5-point consensus, China actually has done a lot in one of the points, that is humanitarian assistance. China attaches great importance to the humanitarian assistance to Myanmar. In August last year, State Councilor and Foreign Minister Wang Yi announced at the pledging conference to support ASEAN's humanitarian assistance to Myanmar that China would provide Myanmar with 1 million doses of vaccines and other assistance through ASEAN. In July this year, China once again provided 2 million vaccines, 2 million doses of vaccine assistance to Myanmar through ASEAN, which I personally cooperate with ASEAN Secretariat, which fully reflects the importance China attaches to ASEAN and its support for Myanmar humanitarian assistance. We have noted that Myanmar and other ASEAN member states have different views on the implementation of the 5-point consensus. We sincerely hope that the two sides could strengthen communication, meet each other's halfway, so as to push the situation in Myanmar to cool down and get stabilized as soon as possible, and make the due contribution to maintaining the unity of ASEAN and the peace and the stability in the region. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Ambassador. Very important point, and really, I think really concrete contribution that China has made to Myanmar. And now I would like to move to Ambassador Igor Risman regarding the expectations from the European Union toward Indonesia as the next chair of ASEAN. The first question would be, do you see that Indonesia has a specific leverage in ASEAN, and particularly towards Myanmar issue? What would you describe as a productive ASEAN mission for the next chairmanship?
Thank you, and also from my side, many thanks for organizing this conversation today. Nicely timed, just 1 week after the summitry in Cambodia, and indeed the G20 summit, which just finished in Bali. I think our expectations of Indonesia are admittedly rather high, and I think that the very successful, very skillful way in which Indonesia managed to have a outcome document out of the G20 has probably only heightened the expectations vis-a-vis Indonesia. Now, there's a number of characteristics which Indonesia has, which I think could be useful. First of all, its history. Of course, Indonesia went itself through a period of transition, which the military played a certain role before they decided to abstain from a role in politics. And I think that's something that definitely can be an inspiration for the story in Myanmar. Secondly, of course, we know that Indonesia is a very big country within the region, with a very competent foreign ministry and a very knowledgeable foreign minister, for that matter. So I think the weight that Indonesia has within the region, but also internationally, can be definitely used for this purpose. Now, it should also be said, and maybe I should have started with that, I think it was one person in the first panel who said that if there is to be change in Myanmar, the change is more likely to come from within. Having said this, Indonesia should do all it can, and we will, as a European Union, definitely lend all the support we can to make that change.
Thank you so much, Ambassador. I think to a certain extent, yes, Indonesia has the experience of our own democratic transition, but definitely I think Myanmar has its own, trajectory as well. But definitely I think that kind of exchanges, is something that is Indonesia probably can play out. But then the next question in relation to that, probably, do you expect any difference that Indonesia can bring next year? And can Indonesia actually make a difference? And probably I would modify the question a little bit. If you can maybe share your view, what sort of strategy do you wish ASEAN chair, which is Indonesia, would employ in regard to improve the situation in Myanmar, while also maintaining ASEAN unity to some extent?
Well, I think the conclusions of the ASEAN summit of last week give a rather precise roadmap of what Indonesia and indeed ASEAN can do. So I think the first thing is the engagement with different stakeholders, which is something that has not necessarily happened yet. That means for Indonesia as chair to engage with the National Unity Government, with the NUCC, with the ethnic groups, over and beyond the engagement it should obviously have with the junta. And that's an engagement which is now very explicit in the summit statement, but which I think should also lead to a certain purpose, and that purpose should be to actually trigger a political process, which for the time being does not exist, and a political process which in turn should lead to a return to democracy in Myanmar. So first things first, we should start with this broad-based engagement and take it step by step, but keep in mind the goal of that particular process. Secondly, it was already mentioned by Ambassador Deng, humanitarian aid, very important. We know that for our humanitarian workers, the situation on the ground is extremely difficult. Humanitarian workers are not giving visas. The aid is stopped at the border. The aid is stopped when they try to cross Myanmar. So there is a fundamental problem of access, and if anything, things will only get worse if we see the adoption of the registration of associations law, which makes it now compulsory for any organization to register with the junta. So a complicated set of parameters, but for Indonesia and indeed the ASEAN Secretary General and the AHA Center, there is an important role there to push that further and to push for the application of the basic humanitarian principles of independence, impartiality, and so on. The third thing I'd say is, again, captured in the ASEAN Summit statement for ASEAN to gather the kind of international engagement from different stakeholders. You mentioned it at the beginning. All of us come with a different angle, maybe different interests, but I think it would be logical if the ASEAN Special Envoy and indeed the United Nations would convene some kind of international engagement, the shape and form of which Indonesia should obviously define on its own. But I think it's needed that we have that kind of collective conversation so that all noses point in the same direction.
Thank you very much, Ambassador Igor. I would like to tap on the last point that you mentioned about some sort of international cooperation, and would like to ask question to Ambassador Deng actually in this regard, because maybe you can enlighten me about this, and probably also Ambassador Igor later on, because many of the observers actually note that there is a need to coordinate the many envoys for Myanmar that we already have now, in order for better coordination between parts of international community that seeks to help Myanmar. Would you reckon that there is a need for a much more concerted effort to support the situation in Myanmar between the international community members? In this context, it's actually very concrete initiative, whether these envoys, the UN Special Envoy, the Chinese Special Envoy for Myanmar, the EU Special Envoy, the Japanese, as well as the ASEAN ASEAN Chair Special Envoy, could actually regularly meet together and then discuss and pull their efforts together to actually trying to find some, solution for Myanmar.
Thank you for your question. Actually, I was once special envoy on Afghanistan issue. In the whole world, maybe there are about 40 countries, more than 40 countries. They have their special envoy on Afghanistan affairs or Afghanistan-Pakistan. Then we had the annual conference, sometimes called Istanbul process, Kabul process, Moscow process format. However, just now you mentioned many countries have a special envoy on Myanmar issue. My knowledge is quite limited. I do not think that many countries have, because Myanmar issue is solely within ASEAN framework, right? China, we do not have special envoy on Myanmar. We have special envoy on Asian affairs, Afghanistan issue. So I do not know exactly how many countries we have a special envoy in this regard. So about your question you mentioned just now, as a matter of fact, we think Myanmar issue is in essence Myanmar's internal affairs, which requires all parties in Myanmar to bear in mind the long-term interests of the country and the people, and find a proper solution through political dialogue within the framework of its constitution and the laws. Myanmar is a member of the ASEAN family, and China supports ASEAN and its envoy in adhering to the ASEAN way and the principle of non-interference to constructively participate to Myanmar's reconciliation process, work with Myanmar to implement the 5-point consensus and contribute to the proper handling of differences among parties in Myanmar through political dialogue. The international community should provide necessary assistance to all parties in Myanmar to carry out dialogue and reconciliation.
Thank you very much, Ambassador. Probably the same question, if I may, Ambassador Igor. What do you think about this kind of possibility of a regular interaction among the special envoys? And I think just to tap on the last statement from Ambassador Deng, do you think more and more countries should have the special envoy for Myanmar? What do you think about this?
Well, I think the point of having a special envoy or not is maybe slightly besides the point, and I say that being one myself. I think what would be important is to gather all the countries that have specific interests in the situation in Myanmar, regardless of the fact that they have an envoy or not, to exactly have the kind of conversation that I was talking about, because of course we all have an interest not just in the kind of return to democracy, but maybe more importantly to the regional stability of Southeast Asia, because that will ultimately impact not just Southeast Asia, but the entire world. And if you take that as a starting point, I think we can definitely find common ground across different countries, different interests, and we all have different leverage points, I think, and it would be important to put them together to see how best we can get out of the current situation. Because again, as somebody said during the first panel this morning, the status quo is just not an option. The status quo means more humanitarian suffering. We're now at 1.1 million people displaced since the coup, 30,000 houses burned down. I don't know how many thousands of people been arrested and put in jail, regardless of the announcement which was made this morning that there might be a release of a number of political prisoners. So I think it's important to inject a certain sense of urgency into the debate, because if we let this slip further and further, it will only trigger more economic collapse, humanitarian suffering, and regional instability.
Thank you very much, Ambassador. I think that's a very important point. The fact that, okay, maybe the situation now, not all countries have special envoy, but definitely we know that countries, especially those actually bordering with Myanmar, as well as not really the one that bordering with Myanmar, have their own interests on the crisis, the fact that they want to push, they want to see some, peaceful restoration in Myanmar to take place. And that needs certainly communication with each other, really, to coordinate some, very important efforts to push in Myanmar. We only have short session for this one. So I will just jump into my last question, and I would like to give the floor opportunities to ask questions and give comments as well, to interact with both ambassador excellencies here. So my last question will be the same for both ambassadors. What do you think would be the greatest challenge for Indonesia's chairmanship in to push for productive and positive progress to ASEAN mission in Myanmar, which in this context definitely will include, I think, the recent development in Myanmar and the upcoming election, like the military-led election in Myanmar, as well as the other challenge of, the fact that, some anxiety that Myanmar would become the object of great power competition to some extent. How do you see what do you think the challenges for Indonesia next year? Ambassador Deng, you want to respond first? What things do you think Indonesia will need to anticipate?
Thank you. Thank you for your question. I once worked in Myanmar for 3 years, more than 3 decades ago, 1985 to 1988. Yeah. When I arrived in Myanmar, at that time it's called Burma. The time when I left 3 years later, it's changed to Myanmar. Rangoon to Yangon. I worked in that period. To my humble knowledge, country, Myanmar issue has a rather complicated and sensitive historical background and reality. So the issue cannot be solved at one stroke, still less through external pressures. So China encourages ASEAN and Myanmar to strengthen communication, maintain patience and confidence, stay committed to promoting peace talks and advance political dialogue and consultation step by step, so as to restart the democratic process and return the governance to the people in an orderly manner. We think that this not only serves the interests of Myanmar, but also meets the expectation of the international community. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Ambassador Deng. Ambassador Igor?
If you ask me what will be the greatest challenge for Indonesia, I'd say the junta. I think that's what we've seen in the course of this year, this constant defiance of the junta vis-a-vis whatever ASEAN has tried to do. You remember the visit of Prime Minister Hun Sen in January, followed immediately by further sentencing of San Suu Kyi and aerial bombing. We had the August ministerials just before we saw the sentencing and execution of 4 political prisoners. We had the ASEAN summit just a week ago, just before we saw the bombing of a concert in Kachin. So there's a pattern there of defiance by the junta of any engagement. So I think that will definitely be the challenge for anyone, but maybe a fortiori for the ASEAN special envoy.
All right. Thank you very much, Ambassador. So we now have around, I think, 20 minutes just for questions, comments from the floor. If there is any from the floor who would like to ask questions or give comments. Yeah, Mbak Susi, if there is any more. Yes, you, Danes. Okay, I'll start with Mbak Susi first and then Danes. Please, Mbak Susi.
Thank you. I'm Susi from Universitas Indonesia. I was just reflecting on Indonesia's experience. Prior to this, we have Komisi Tiga Negara when we were trying to get our independence. Then in the new order period, we have IGGI. Both are led by outsiders, and they managed to create a committee to help. The first one is to help Indonesia's gain independence. The second one is to gain stability after the new order era. So maybe with the initiative of Indonesia through ASEAN chairmanship and the UN, probably together get some people, not exactly envoys, but just some committee whatsoever to discuss this. Would be like the Qatar Committee for Afghanistan, for instance. Maybe somebody should tell the government of Indonesia that this experience is useful, or else you have some transition like in Argentina, where you have the mothers of the victims demonstrating until the military comes down, or we have big demonstrations like in Indonesia until we are democratized. So maybe try to form some sort of a committee that can be useful. Not exactly an ambassadorship, but IGI was some sort of thing led by the Dutch, purely on economics. Maybe you can talk about economics because that's what would interest the junta, economic help. Thank you.
Thank you, Masusi. Danesh, please. Just introduce yourself. I know you, but probably the colleagues here.
Yes. So should I stand up?
Up to you.
Okay. Hello, Ambassador. My name is Danes. I'm from Indonesian Institute for Advanced International Studies. I would like to ask a question to both of you regarding the role of NUGs. I know both European Union and China have a different view on NUGs in their capacity. We know that NUG has a representative office in France and also Czech Republic, members of the European Union. I would like to ask, from the point of view from each China and European Union, what do you see the future or the role of NUG in Myanmar peace process? And as you both European Union and China are the strategic partner of ASEAN, if you could give an advice to Indonesia regarding how to treat NUG, what kind of advice do you want to give to Indonesia? That's all. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Danes. I think, yeah, I hope like some colleagues from the Indonesian MOFA still here to listen to Masusi's question earlier. But I think the point on the view on NUG, I think both ambassadors here can also respond to that. Ambassador Deng or Ambassador Igor would like to. Ambassador Deng, probably first. What do you think about the NUG movement?
Thank you. Yeah, I noticed since the change of political situation in Myanmar, February last year, NUGs not only in ASEAN, right? Also out of ASEAN, they quite concerned the situation in Myanmar, and they of course express their views, have their voice in it. They also try their best to give suggestions, proposals to the government. And as I mentioned just now, Myanmar is a member of ASEAN. And as I heard many times, ASEAN regard Myanmar as an integral part of ASEAN, as mentioned by the just concluded ASEAN summit, right? It's something of a family matter. So that's what I mentioned just now. We support ASEAN to play an important or critical leading role in find a solution, solve the Myanmar issue. And of course, international community, including NGO, provide a favorable condition for ASEAN to duly play its role and solve problems. And as the moderator mentioned on the outset of this second session, Cambodia as the chair, beginning from this year, made a lot of effort. We all see that, right? Prime Minister Hun Sen made his visit to Myanmar, and it's Deputy Prime Minister Kuan visited twice, right? is supposed to make his third visit to Myanmar. Try to help Myanmar implement the 5-point consensus. And so in this regard, I think the world community, all the sectors, we need to work together to provide a favorable environment for the chair of ASEAN to do its job. Less or negative impact or pressure from outside, not only to ASEAN, to its chair, and also to Myanmar. In this way, I think maybe the situation will be different. Thank you.
Thank you, Ambassador. Ambassador Igor, you want to add to the point?
Sure. Well, we see the NUG as a very important actor in the political process in that conversation, which I spoke about, that is absolutely needed to decide on the future of the country. So we see that the NUG is developing increasingly comprehensive and sophisticated policies. We also see that the NUG has a sway on what happens on the ground, and for these reasons alone, it would already be important to engage with the NUG. Hence, that would be my recommendation if somebody would ask me. But in any case, it is part of the summit recommendations to engage with all stakeholders, and it's rather implicit that that includes the NUG. So I'd say engage, engage, engage.
Thank you very much, Ambassador. So I would like to see if there's any question from the online. Okay, so, oh, sorry, there's someone. Oh, Pa Puja at the back. Is there anything else from the, before I go to the online question? Okay, Pa Puja, please. Please kindly introduce yourself, Pa.
Thank you, Puja from the ASEAN Institute for Peace and Reconciliation. Thank you for giving me the opportunity. Very brief, 2 takes. First, what is your reading with regard to the response of the junta with regard to the recommendation of the ASEAN leaders in Phnom Penh, which is the mentions about disassociating and also not cooperating? This will give another roadblocks or windows of opportunity. I don't know. Second, what about the possibility of involving military to military communication as what Indonesia did before quite successfully? So can, within the Indonesian chairmanship next year, this military to military communications can be revived again? Thank you.
Thank you, Ambassador Puja. So probably I would like to go with Ambassador Igor first and then give the chance to Ambassador Deng. Please, Ambassador Igor.
Sure. But I think the reaction of the junta was the kind of knee-jerk reaction which we've seen now all along in the course of the year and a half. That is one of continued defiance and further dissociation of ASEAN by the junta. So I think for ASEAN or for the international community, it would be important to continue some kind of pressure. We ourselves have on the 8th of November, on the anniversary of the elections, added several more persons and a entity on our restrictive measures list. So keep on the pressure, but also, of course, it's in the remit and the role of the ASEAN Special Envoy to continue its engagement. But I think we need both. On your military to military contact, I can only agree. For sure, it's important that uniforms like to talk to uniforms. So for sure, there's avenues to walk there.
Ambassador. Ambassador Deng.
Thank you. Thank you for your question. About the ASEAN summit just concluded in Phnom Penh, we all know the joint statement issued by the summit on Myanmar issue. They review and decide the situation of Myanmar, and they task foreign minister to come up with specific measures, including a timetable, right? So quite possibly the next foreign minister meeting in Jakarta next March, we'll make concrete proposals. Of course, we all know the response, as Ambassador Yugo just mentioned, from Myanmar authority concerning the joint declaration by the ASEAN summit. And that's why I mentioned in my talk that both sides, Myanmar, ASEAN, need to strengthen communications to show flexibility to each other. And I think that to pressurize Myanmar to impose sanctions against the country or isolate Myanmar will not work. For the almost last 2 years, we can see what you can get from all these: pressure, isolation, sanction. It doesn't work. So that's why I say we encourage ASEAN to engage with Myanmar in ASEAN way. What is ASEAN way, right? As ASEAN, we all know that, right? So we hope when Indonesia assume its chairmanship next year, it will continue to uphold the ASEAN way, right? And to show flexibility to Myanmar, and we also encourage Myanmar to show flexibility to ASEAN. So in this way, maybe we can have some positive result. About the military to military, to tell the truth, I do not know. Maybe Indonesia has its experience. Indonesia is a big country, important member of ASEAN. Its experience in the previous year when tackling with a lot of very difficult issues. So I like to see positive results by Indonesia if Indonesia will take a different approach. Thank you.
Thank you, Ambassador. So I would like now to take questions from the online. Okay, we have 2 questions here. Okay, the first question from Faisal Tamrin Hakim. The first question, does China open its border to Burmese and how China respond to that? Open its border, China's border for Burmese, and how China respond to actually the Myanmaris actually coming into the China's border. And the second question, since Ambassador Drisman said that humanitarian team cannot enter the country, how about to help Burmese refugees who flew to ASEAN member countries? Okay, I stop there and I'll take the second question later. Please, Ambassador Deng, you want to respond to the first question first?
Actually, I worked in Jakarta. I'm ambassador to ASEAN. I cannot not say exactly what we open or not open. What I can say that we have normal relations with Myanmar, economically especially. But also, you may know China still adopt a dynamic COVID-0 approach, right? Well, we'll continue very strict if they come. It should not be very freely, right? We need the testing, we need the quarantine. So I cannot give you a very definite answer in this regard.
No.
On the second question, I think it's more for ASEAN colleagues to say whether or not they want to take on Myanmar refugees. Now, just to be clear, I didn't say that humanitarian workers cannot enter at all. I just said it's difficult.
Thank you. I would like to see the second question. Okay. From Wunaso, I think it's a kind of a general question. What are your reactions toward today's events vis-a-vis the juntas releasing the political prisoners, including the former British ambassador Vicky Bauman and Australian economic advisor Chantanel and Japanese filmmaker Toru Kubota? This is a very recent development that, the junta releasing, 6,000 political prisoners, including these 3 foreigners. So, Ambassador Deng, do you have any sort of opinion on this?
Yes, I also got the news this morning, and I think it's positive. So, as I mentioned just now, both sides show flexibility to each other. But of course, I brief Myanmar authority made the decision based on its national policy, right? They will not do it so as to appease some countries. So in the whole process, we need to admit that Myanmar authority, they